Welcome everyone. I'd like to commence by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today, the Burra people of the Darung Nation, whose lands, winds and waters we now all share. And as we share our learnings within our community of humans united by business, I also acknowledge the wisdom that is forever embedded in Aboriginal custodianship of country. My name is Dan Liszka, and I'd like to welcome all of you to our November Hubb Conversations event. So welcome. Quick bit of housekeeping, phones to silent if you haven't done so already. So that's the first thing. Bathrooms are just outside on your left. And Anthony Burns, who's all things photography in our community, will be doing social media headshots. He's at the back there. I think Anthony charges $250 if you go to his studio. He's doing them tonight for $50 if you want to get your social media headshot done. I'm sure your LinkedIn profile will appreciate it. The purpose of these conversation events is to bring together some of the elements required to assist us in solving our business challenges and also to make the most of some of the opportunities before us. So some of those elements are, firstly, we're human. We like to talk. We get a lot out of having lots of conversations with other business owners. And more specifically, meaningful and purposeful conversations are valuable to us as business owners. And at Hubb, we've designed our events to allow people and give people enough time to have meaningful and purposeful conversations. There's also an opportunity to listen. So listening is when we learn. And same as there are different kinds of conversations, there's also different kinds of listening. Being open, being non-judgmental about what we're hearing represents the greatest opportunity that we have to learn more and apply smarter solutions in our businesses. So one of the reasons you've chosen to be here today to listen to our featured speaker, Jon Brett, is to listen to him. I invite you to be open. When you hear something and you think to yourself, you know, that's easy for him, he's got this, he's got that, he's done whatever. I encourage you to maybe think that little voice that's saying, maybe don't be the little voice that's saying or encouraging you not to be as open as you could be, to ignore that voice, be as open as you can. Maybe that little voice is blocking you from getting the answer that you need. I encourage you to spend this time with us, being open to Jon's insights. Challenge yourself. Ask yourself, how can I apply the stories, the experiences, what Jon will share with us? How can I apply that in my situation, my business, and even personally? I encourage you to connect with everybody in the room. Be generous and abundant, as I've experienced most of you be. Share your knowledge, share your contacts, share your challenges. One thing that's really important to me is that Hubb be a safe place for people to get what they need. As business owners, our staff expect us to have all the answers. As business owners, our clients often expect us to have all the answers. Shareholders, directors, regulators all expect us to have answers, and we often get into this pattern of pretending that we know more than we do. So one thing that's really, really important to me is Hubb is a place where you don't have to pretend. You can actually say to someone, you can say to Anton, how do you do that? How does one get that thing done? You've spoken about this, you've spoken about that. How can I apply that in my business? So I encourage you to ask for help, ask for what you need, and I'm hoping we'll spark lots and lots of conversations this evening. So now I'd like to introduce our guest interviewer for this evening. You all know him, Sean Collins, our Director of Outcomes at Humans United by Business. Most of you know him really well. He's got a background in IT, having grown and owned and exited a successful IT services business. We both met many, many years ago doing our, what you could call our coaching apprenticeship, I guess, when we learned how to be business coaches. Crashed a lot of golf carts and had quite a few drinks since then. A few things you may not know about Sean. And I had 3 really embarrassing things here before, but these notes have been edited now. So So I'll stick with what you may not know about Sean is that he's a really keen amateur photographer. He loves travel and regularly does so with his family. So he's going to he's grabbing Catherine and the kids and going to Ireland this summer for a month. And he's also the only Irishman that I know that doesn't like whiskey neat. So he loves tequila instead. So please join me in a warm welcome, our guest interviewer for this evening, Mr. Sean Thomas.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you. Now, I'd like to introduce our featured speaker for this evening. He's a person of notable business success. He's a former Investec private equity executive. He's got broad experience as an investor, as a fund manager, as a chair. He sits on the boards of high-tech businesses Mobilicom and Soho Property App. He also holds significant investments in a number of other private companies. He's a non-executive director of Vocus Group, he was a non-executive director of Vocus Group, Godfrey's, Paz Group, and was also a non-executive deputy president of the NRMA. We've worked together on the WABSX project with women on boards, and Jon has chaired 2 syndicates so far, and over the last 17 months, he's been instrumental in supporting 3 female directors who are graduates of the program to land 4 ASX roles. And he's also supported a number of other female directors into numerous other non-listed roles. He was with us last month, leading the conversation and interviewing James Spenceley. And one of the reasons we asked Jon back is that whenever I get an opportunity to chat to James, I'm always squeezing in an extra question or two, what about this, what about that, how do you do this? And whenever I've asked him, who's the best director you've ever worked with, he points to Jon. And when I ask him, who's the person that's had the biggest impact in your career and helped you be successful, and he points to Jon. So on that basis, I thought it would be criminal for us not to get Jon back, to hear Jon's story, to hear about Jon's journey. So please join me in a warm welcome, our featured speaker for this evening, the chairman of Stride Corp Equity Partners, Mr. Jon Brett.
Thank you. Nice to see you. Thanks, Dan. Sorry about that. Hello. Hello.
Welcome, Jon.
Thank you, Dan. Is this on?
Sean.
Is this on? No. No, it's not. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so the
Thanks,
way
Dan.
the formal part of the proceedings will work tonight is that Sean is going to lead the conversation by asking questions of Jon, and my role is to act as a kind of host and convener, ears and eyes for the audience. And with about 20 minutes to go, I'm going to take over from Sean and ask a few of the questions that many of you have sent in to us from Jon. And we'll finish up with final observations and predictions from Jon. So, Sean?
Fantastic.
Over to you,
Thank
mate.
you, Dan. Thank you, Dan, and thank you, Jon. Look, Jon, we've had a good chat before today's catch-up as well, and I suppose, and from Dan's introduction, you're best known as an investor. What I'd like you to do is perhaps take us back to your birthplace in South Africa and tell us about that path towards being an investor. Did you choose that career, or did you just fall into it? And just give us some of the insights coming to Australia, etc.
It's a long conversation, but I'll try to keep it short. I started sort of life out as a partner in an auditing firm, and we were probably the fastest growing auditing firm because all our ex-partners left the firm, started businesses, bought businesses, and became enormously rich. Every time they bought a new company, they gave us the business. So we were growing. And one of my ex-colleagues said I should come and join him and become his CFO in a company called W&A. It was he had 3 public companies, and I was to be CFO of one of the groups. I joined him, and after about a month or so, I decided I'd rather be CEO. And one of the things that I did to sort of to learn about the business was I used to get to work when the factories used to open. We had 18 operating subsidiaries. I used to arrive in the morning at about 7 when they opened, and every morning I used to go through a different operating subsidiary. And bear in mind, I still had a day job, so I could do that, go through the factory floors, learn what was going on in the businesses, and sort of get to my office at about 8 or 8:30, depending on traffic, for the day. And another thing I did was, during that year, I read somewhere that if you read one business book a week, after a year you would have read 52 business books, and I did that. And after about 9 months, they decided to actually make me CEO of that business. And that was quite good for about 3 years. And then one of the banks approached a colleague and I, and they said to us, we have this business that's in trouble. We'll lend you, at that time, conversion rate was pretty similar. We'll lend you about $1 billion, and we'll finance you to take over this business. And I can tell you, I was in my early 30s when this sort of happened. So we suddenly, from being an employee, we had...
So to clarify, we'll lend you $1 billion.
We'll lend you $1 billion to take over this company. And we ended up owning the majority shares in a company. We had 9 hospitals. We had 132 supermarkets. We had 2 factories making housewares. We had timber plantations, farms. We had this big conglomerate. And I'll tell you, life was fantastic. You're in your mid-30s and you're king of the world, and they say whatever else is in trouble, we will give you. And
Making it sound pretty easy.
you think this is pretty cool. And after doing this, after about 9 months, the bank that did the deal with us was a bank called Trust Bank, got taken over by Senbank. Senbank got taken over by Bancorp. Bancorp got taken over by ABSA. So the team we're dealing with is not the team that liked us. And they call us into a room and they say, we don't know why we lent you so much money, but we want it back.
Wow.
And you're sitting in this room with 5 of them, 2 of us, no air, and you say, I've got an agreement that gives me about 17 years to repay this all back to you. And they say, well, we've got a market cap of, I can't remember, $60 billion, and we can put you in court for the rest of the time. So we suggest you work out how you're going to repay us back this money. And for the next 3 years, we never went to bed. We merged, we sold businesses, we amalgamated, we did a whole lot of things. And after 3 years, we had repaid them back every single cent. And we were left with some assets. Thank God we were left with assets ourselves. Otherwise, it would have been a very futile exercise. But we learned afterwards why they did this to us. And one of the reasons they did it to us was because the Reserve Bank in South Africa went to them and said to them, when you take over Bancorp, we will underwrite all the bad debts for a year. After that, we're not going to underwrite. So they wanted to know if they could get it back from us or write us off and get the Reserve Bank to pay for it. And then, so after doing this and paying them back and left with a few assets, I emigrated to Australia. That was a very short summary of a very tumultuous period in my life.
And you arrived in Australia to me in '93.
That's right, yeah.
At that stage then, it being a tumultuous period, as you just alluded to, did you relax and catch your breath perhaps, or did you continue the upward...
So I arrived in Australia and I decided that I really want to retire a bit and really take it easy. And you're sitting at home and the phone doesn't ring and you're by yourself. And it's actually very lonely. And I picked up a few M&A gigs and I was doing a little private work. And you do a nice deal for somebody and you want to go home and celebrate and there's no one to celebrate it with. Your friends are all working, everybody's working, nobody cares what you've got to say anymore. And I thought to myself, I don't care what job it is I take. I don't want to go home doing M&A for people and sit by myself. So I applied for a job to become the CEO of a company called Techway, which they gave me the job. I was quite surprised, but they gave me the job. And that was my first foray into business in Australia.
Okay. And from an influencing perspective then, who are the influencers within that career within Techway? What were who were the people and what were their characteristics that helped you to succeed in that piece?
So Techway was a very hard business because when I walked in, they never told me any of this. And I tell you, you don't do due diligence, that's the big problem. Techway was losing money. And probably the reason they gave me the job.
Sorry? What did Techway do? What
Techway, we pioneered internet banking in Australia. Up until then, no one had heard of internet banking. So we wrote the Commonwealth Bank, we wrote St. George, we wrote Advanced Bank, internet banking. And in fact, when we went and sold it to people, to banks, they said, no one's going to transact money on the internet. That's too dangerous, no one's going to transact it. And in fact, so we did it, and the CBA were very supportive of us, and we just wrote the CBA's internet banking. We just installed it, and 2 guys arrived at the CBA, and they've developed a program that remembers the keystrokes that you do. And they said to the CBA, you need to give us $200,000 to buy the program from us, otherwise internet banking, as you know, it is dead, because any password you put in, they could find out what the password was. And in those days, you never had alphanumeric passwords, or you had 4-digit passwords. And CBA actually called the police on these young guys. I really don't know what happened. Hello, I've lost you all.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Hello.
They'll sort it out.
And does this come back?
Yeah.
And so what we did, how we fixed that problem was, I don't know if you remember that far back, is that when you went on the keypad. Sorry?
CBA called the police.
CBA called the police, but I don't know if you remember that far back, is when you went on the keypad to put in your password, we changed where the numbers were. So it wasn't 1, 2, 3. The first time it was 1 and then 3, and then the 3 became where the 9 was. So even if it remembered where it was, next time you logged in, the keypad was a keypad on your computer. It wasn't your own keypad. The 1 was in a different place. And that's how we sort of solved that problem. So Techway was in. So then I suddenly find out Techway is in financial difficulties. So I spend the next 9 months. Don't want to come to Australia having my first foray into business a failure. Don't want to spend the next 9 months. I don't want to have it a failure. So the next 9 months I spent trying to sort this out, this mess. And cut a long story short, I sorted quite a lot out. We had $2 million in the bank after about 9 months, and we had 3 on-market takeover bids. And then I was unemployed again.
And during that, during that phase, John, the sorting out piece, what were the insights and the key learnings that you had? What were the things you had to do that were changing that business around?
I'll tell you, one of the things I really learned is you've got to talk to your banks continually. You've got to tell them what's going on. You've got to hope they're not going to bounce your payroll. And when I go to banks and people tell me how good they are at businesses, they've got these bankers and they know everything about business. And I say that until you're thinking, can I really meet this payroll, you never run a business. I don't care. You can sit in your ivory tower at the bank and payroll. Sorry, hello. And payrolls are going to get met. But if you haven't been in that situation, giving advice to other people's hard, really. Because they come into, they got a problem meeting a payroll, and yet you sit in the fancy office and you're going to tell them how to fix their business.
There's a lot of business owners, and perhaps even here today, that that experience that frustration, that stress of trying to meet payroll and the other stresses in the business as well. Can you share with us, John, some of the insights or some of the things and the activities you do to manage that level of stress? What do you do to...
I tell you, I'm better now than then. I'm not sure how I managed that stress then. I was probably very uptight.
Okay.
I don't know if I managed it that well then.
Right.
Now I'm more relaxed.
Now you're more relaxed. So, what does more relaxed mean?
One of the things I've learned, I keep losing this mic, I'm sorry. One of the things I've learned is that when you share a problem with a whole lot of people, so I shared it with my board, I shared it with some of the key staff, shared it with the bankers, it doesn't become your problem, it becomes everybody's problem. And when you've got a secret and you've done something wrong, it's actually your problem. And when you talk to your board and say, this is what I did, or this is what happened, or this is what's happening, it's actually everybody's problem. And it's one of the great advices I give people on boards is go and tell your board what's going on. It's all of your problems, it's not only yours. Keep it to yourself and it actually becomes yours. And when you tell them finally, it's your problem, not theirs.
So is there a sense of the fear element that people don't want to share, business owners don't want to share and go and ask for that help? Is that...
I think people are scared about what's going to happen to them. I think it's a self-preservation thing. Maybe I can fix it. Maybe they'll think worse of me if I tell them. Maybe they'll start to judge me. It sort of goes like that. But, when you read Anna Woods' story, that girl that died, I'm just changing the subject, I apologize. She was drinking too much water when she died, that girl that died of that drug thing. Mm-hmm. Her friends didn't tell their parents, or didn't call a parent in, and the person said, listen, you're in trouble already. Now try to get out of it. And if they would have gone and called an adult and told an adult, we have this problem, it would have been a shared problem and they would have done something about it, but they didn't. So same philosophy. You just share the problem.
So in business, you're encouraging business owners to go and share the problem.
And talk to people that can help you. And a lot of people around will give you solutions and try to help you. And people don't mind being asked for advice, I found. You can phone up anyone and ask them for advice, and they will actually come and they will come have a coffee with me, and no problem.
And in your when you now look for advice and get support and input, John, do you have coaches and mentors that you go to for yourself looking for insights?
I was in a group like this for quite a long time, and you could go to a meeting and you could share anything about your personal life, your business, in confidence with them all. They would help you. You could get to meet anyone you wanted to meet. They would give you introductions, and they would be very supportive of you. And if you need, I mean, you can have a spouse that does that also, but you need people around you that can help you. It's hard to build a business as a solo journey, I've got to say.
Okay. And that solo piece, do you find, you mentioned a while ago that it's lonely. What's your suggestions, what are your recommendations to people around not being lonely?
Groups like this are fantastic because it actually, it takes away, you deal with like-minded people and people you can talk to. So join groups like this. I was a member of a group very similar to this for a lot of years. Join people, they talk to you on the same wavelength as you. They understand the issues. When you tell people you're having difficulty meeting a payroll, it's quite amazing how many people will tell you, oh, they've been there. And if they haven't been there, they've been very lucky, honestly. Let's get real. Or they've been on a job in a very successful company. But
Right. Okay. Fantastic. And just linking back a little bit further to some of the strategies that you ran and put in place with businesses, can you share some of the insights and the highlights around what those strategies were? What are the things you learned? Again, just taking you towards where you are now.
Well, it's the same as James. Like some of the points that James raised is that you've got to surround yourself by really good people. At the end of the day, if you're going to employ people that are not as clever as you, it's a mistake. Find the brightest people you can and employ them and take advice from people. And take as much advice as you can for most issues, because people will generally give you good advice, even employees, even on factory floors. If you go to employ on a factory floor who's not educated at all, and you ask them how would they solve this problem that they've got in the area, they'll give you an answer. They're very intelligent. The fact they haven't got education is neither here nor there. They will know an answer, and if you're prepared to go and ask people and not be too proud, it'll help you.
Okay. So it's an interesting piece that you just touched on there, the proud element, and business owners looking to succeed and stretch themselves and stretch their business. Do you see that as a blocker for some individuals?
No, not really. I think that, well, I'll start again. You'll never succeed if you're going to do it by yourself and not have people around you, because then you're going to have a one-man business and it's going to be a small business.
Right.
So it's not a blocker, but if you're prepared to give up, if you can get a good person to really join you and give up some equity to that person because they're that good, there's no point in owning 100% of a very small business. I'd rather own 10% of a very big business.
Right.
So I always encourage people if people can really contribute towards your business, look after them. Because if they don't look after them, they're going to go somewhere else. And young people, good people can actually take you to where you want to go to quicker than you can do it yourself. Now look, maybe you can do it yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Don't get me wrong, there are people who do it themselves. Most people who've really succeeded have got help.
And what are the characteristics that you look for when you're employing people and bringing them into the organisation, perhaps at an equity level or just as an employee? What are those characteristics?
So I'll tell you some of the things at Investec, because that's one of the things. When I was in Investec, it was fantastic, the employment process. You had 6 interviews.
6 interviews.
6 interviews. The first interview was, are you qualified? Do you have the skills? And bear in mind, Investec was a big place. So you say you're an accountant, check all your credentials, make sure you're an accountant. And let's assume you get through that because you will. And then they do reference checking, of course. But they have 5 more interviews to see if you can get on with the rest of us, which is quite an amazing thing that they ask a lot of the people you're going to work with to interview you at the same level as you. And do you like that person, or is that person, can you work with them? Because there's no point in getting the brightest person on the block who you can't stand after about 3 days. So it's people you can work with. The point I'm coming to is that people you can work with, that can contribute, but you want to go to work and actually see them. You don't want to go to work and say, oh, I don't want to see this person, because they're making your life a misery. They've got to be on your side and help you get you where you want to get also.
Okay.
And how do you work that out, John? Like, again, the interview...
No, that's hard. I can tell you. How do you work it out? You try assess it at the interview stage, and then you try to do enough reference checking and I mean, and you've got to make sure, and the trouble with reference checking is that sometimes previous employers just give good references. And I learned a very bad lesson in New Zealand about that. We had a pub business, and I phoned up Scenic Circle in New Zealand, who had this CFO, and I said, came to join us. I said, can you give me a reference? And they said to me, he leads from the front, and they gave me a whole lot of references for him. And when we employed him, I realized he couldn't add 1 and 1. He couldn't get to 2. And I phoned up the recruitment company and I said, did you check his qualifications? And she says, I'll phone you back. And she says, oh, we didn't, and he's not qualified. So on his CV, firstly, it says he's qualified. The recruitment agency didn't check his qualifications. So I phone up Scenic Circle. I phone up and I speak to the CEO of Scenic Circle in New Zealand. And I say, this is the references I got from your HR person about this guy. They said, firstly, they're very good friends. They're best mates. Just want you to know that. Right. Secondly, I said, he leads from the front. He says, absolutely. 4:45 every day. He's the first one out the door. He's leading from the front to get home. And every answer the HR person gave the recruiter was true. Leading from the front. There were a whole lot of those. But they were all, and you learn from that. Now, how do you know before you employ a person? You don't really. I mean, James is right. You find people who can give you references that work for you. That would be the best way. But it's a bloody hard game to know who's really going to succeed and who isn't going to succeed.
And when you're in that sphere, do you try to get rid of them fairly quickly, or do you tolerate them? Do you give them the space?
No, I've learned as I grow older and uglier that you've got to get rid of people very quickly. Take your pain and get rid of them.
Right.
And the moment I went to this guy and I said to this guy, you're not qualified. And he stood up and he said to me, this is constructive dismissal. And he went to get a lawyer. I hadn't even told him I was going to fire him yet. And he got a lawyer. So, but you've got to get rid of people quickly. They're bad for the business. Okay. The longer you leave them there, the bigger the sore is, the bigger it festers, the bigger that other staff, people start thinking about it, and it becomes a problem in the whole business. So I try to get rid of people quickly.
So that bad apple syndrome,
it's terrible.
Creates some rot, etc.
And also that they're never going to be truthful as to what's happening with them. So they're going to give reasons as to why you're in the wrong versus them. Just get rid of them.
Right. Okay. How have you utilised the strategy piece, John? With maintaining the good people in the business, is that a strong element that you've driven through the business that you've been involved in getting a clear strategy, sharing with the staff, aligning them around that piece?
Yeah, and James, you had the same question. Sort of had the same question for James. Is that people have got to know what your goals are, where you're going to, what the business is about, what their role is, and what you expect from them. And that if somebody once gave me an answer that's not in my pay description, and I said, if I ever get an answer from you like that again, we won't work together. People, they've got to go out of their way to want to be successful in the business and work and go the extra mile. And you have to reward them properly. You make sure that they're rewarded properly, that they get that they get the recognition at work, and that you take them with you on the journey. Whatever you're trying to do, trying to achieve, you're speaking to them about.
Okay. And how do you do that, John? What are the things that you do, and what would you suggest to people here?
I'm not a CEO anymore, so that's changed. But my biggest thing used to be, and I read this in a book and I really followed it, is management by wandering around. Okay. I used to spend an enormous amount of time, not an enormous amount of time because you get fined for that also, but I used to spend half an hour every day walking around, talking to people on the shop floor, talking to people at work, finding out what they're doing, what's succeeding. Is there anything that we can do in our division to help them? At Investec, I knew everybody. Everybody knew me because I used to walk around and talk to people. And when the deals came and I shared deals with people and gave people deals, they used to bring them to me. So you build up a collegiate business with people by doing that.
So you're not doing it yourself. So what advice are you giving to the companies or the CEOs that you're investing in? Is it that advice? Or
if they don't know each member of staff,
They don't, is it?
I say if they don't.
If they don't.
If they're not walking around. I mean, James could go back to James. James could walk around the whole of Vocus and know almost everybody by name,
Right.
which is fantastic. He knew what everybody did, and he had an open door policy. Come and talk to me. Of course, you get people that abuse it. You get people that come in every 5 minutes to ask you everything, and they think they're going to get promoted above everybody else because they happen to want to spend a lot of time in your company. You've got to learn how to stop that. But you've got to know what's going on in most facets of your business. And sitting in an office while everybody else is working all the time doesn't really work.
And is there a size where you stop doing that?
You should never stop doing it, by the way. Never stop doing it. Doesn't matter how big your size is. Because if you take St. George under Gail Kelly or Westpac under Gail Kelly, if you talk to Gail Kelly staff, Gail Kelly used to walk around, talk to people. They used to call her the sunflower because as she was walking around, people's heads used to follow her like this. That's confidential. Please don't repeat it.
We'll scrub that from the video. Fantastic.
So even, people, a lot of the high-performing CEOs will do that, will know people.
Right. I'd like to sort of just flip for a second, John, and change the context from perhaps being a little bit upbeat and on the positive side, but where are the failures? When something has gone wrong somewhere along the line, do you have a favourite failure perhaps, or can you share some of the lowlights and some of the challenges that arose for yourself?
You haven't got enough time for failures, I promise you. Okay. Look, if you
well, learnings from failures.
If you've succeeded at everything that you've ever done in your whole life, then you're remarkable. Then you're one of a kind. Most people have a lot of failures. I've had a lot of failed investments.
Sure.
I've had a lot of. Fortunately, I haven't had that many failures of businesses I've been involved with.
Okay.
Because if they are failing, Techway was failing, and if they are failing, then you've got to work out how you're going to save this thing, and you're going to save everybody's job. So
what's a failed investment then? Can you give us some of the characteristics of what that looks like?
I've got a lot of investments in China. So one of the characteristics of failed investments, one of the ones that we invested in was square dancing in China. Every woman over the age of about 45 does square dancing. It's got an amazing following, amazing. And it's an exercise, a form of exercise, and they go out and meet their friends. It's a social thing, etc. One problem, they don't use apps. They don't use apps. Who knew that?
I thought there'd be an app for that, sure.
Who knew that? It wasn't an app, it was our app. They didn't use it.
Okay.
So, you make investments and you lose money on investments. And I've lost, I can give you countless of stories of losing money on investments. And I can give you countless ones of making money. And thank God the ones of making money are more than the ones of losing money. Otherwise, I'd be insolvent. But I can rattle off a lot of failed investments and things I should have done differently at the time. And I should have known better.
So what would they be? Those universal learnings that you're now applying to future investments that you could share with people?
I'll tell you. So we do a lot of startup investments. We do a lot of that, and I've learned that you got to back people. It doesn't matter what the business is. You just have to back people. So 3 guys come and see us, and they want to start a rideshare business, not in competition with Uber, but on those lines. They come and see us, and it's a fantastic, fantastic, fantastic idea. I love the idea, and I want to do it with them, but for a couple of problems. Firstly, they all arrive in suits. Not that there's anything wrong with being in a suit, because I'm in a suit, but these guys want to be in ride sharing. People in ride shares don't wear suits. Secondly, I say to the guys, have you ever driven a taxi? Because this is going to be, Uber's a taxi sort of, and this is ride share. Have you ever driven that? No. Why don't you go and hire yourself a van and drive around and pick up people and charge them and see what the landscape's about? Because all you've done is put together a business plan in your suit. You come to see me in your suit. You're used to going to a job where you've never had to meet payroll. And you're going to now run this fleet services sort of similar to taxis. And you've had no experience in that industry. Why would I back you? Because you're the smartest. You are the smartest guy in the room. Clearly, these were very bright young people, but they're just wrong for what they want. They're wrong for what they want the money for. So I don't see how I'm going to back, no disrespect to people in suits, a guy in a suit who wants to start a cab company if he's never driven a cab. Doesn't know anything about it. Why would I want to put money up with him?
So is it domain experience in the vertical?
It's it's that, or surrounding yourself by people who have got that experience. So you don't have to have it. If you would have come with a mate of his who actually drives a cab or is an Uber driver who knows what's going on, who's going to be a shareholder, who could explain to me what happens in various situations, I might have said, you know what, we may back this. But none of them had any of the experience. So we are very careful to make sure that anyone we want to back has at least quite a good knowledge of where they want to take us to. And another thing is they mustn't have full-time jobs. So when a guy says, well, when this becomes successful, I'll leave my job at Westpac. No good. I mean, he's saying, put up my money, take all the risks, and if it doesn't work for me, I'm going to stay at Westpac. So then why am I going to put up money for him to stay at Westpac so he keeps his job? Right. If it works, he's taking 2 bets. I'm not in the, I don't want to bet.
You're not an each-way man, it's either...
I'm an each-way man, but I want him to be an each-way man.
Sure. What I'm hearing is you want him to be committed.
I want him to be committed. I want him to be absolute. And Steve Baxter, who's on Shark Tank, he was also on the Vocus board for a short period, and I know Steve Baxter enormously well. And he will tell you that all these principles that he got off the Vocus board from me, he'll tell you, but you hear him saying some of these same things that, if you're not in this committed, don't come to me.
Right.
Interesting. And John, you said we. Do you invest on your own, or as part of a syndicate, or
I very seldom
other people?
I very seldom invest on my own. I have a partner that we sort of invest together with, and I always try and introduce colleagues and other people. We never try to do anything individually, and I'll tell you why. Because the other people have got knowledge. So what we look for is people who know more about the industry than we do, and we look for people that we can share the idea with, who are prepared to write their own checks. Because you've got 2 or 3 or 4 brains looking at the same thing who'll say, you know what, I don't really like this investment. I know you like it, but this is why I don't like it. And that can save you. You can lose out on some good investments, don't get me wrong, but it can save you quite a lot of heartache in the long term. So I like to invest with people.
And if I could just jump in with one more there. Any investments that have gone past that you wish you had invested in?
Well, I can tell you that there are so many you wouldn't even. I can tell you a lot of them. All the ones that you see in the newspaper, we Afterpay and all of those. Airtask, which James, I was a founding investor in there. But I've missed as many good ones as I have missed bad ones. I probably missed more bad ones, but I've missed a few good ones. But at the end of the day, I haven't got enough money to just invest in everything that ever comes along. And yes, I'm going to miss good ones.
The business partner that you referred to when we chatted, you said you've got the same business partner for the past 40 years.
Yeah,
correct. Long time. Congratulations. Lots of business owners, here and in business in general, or either have business partners or they're looking for them, perhaps. In your view, what are the characteristics you look for in a business partner? In that equity piece, how do you sustain a 40-year relationship?
The first thing is we sort of can put up the same amount of money, which sort of helps at the time.
Okay.
We have very different experiences, and we talk to each other, and we very seldom argue on any point, because nobody wins because they're mighty. We win because you can prove to the other person why you're right. Okay. So we don't have an argument which says, I know better than you, so therefore it doesn't work that way. Come back and show me why.
So is it a discussion, or is it a demonstration?
No, it's always discussions. It's long discussions about investments. It's long discussions. We both want to get to the same place. Mm-hmm. We both want to do the same things. We both want the same successes.
And what are the characteristics of that open discussion? It's what I'm hearing on one level, I just want to be clear, is it's a prove me right, prove me wrong. Is that?
Yeah, it's not as black and white. It's not prove me right or prove me wrong. It's more, in fact, prove me right, prove me wrong. Or I like this investment very much, and he'll say, I don't like it at all, and I'll say, why?
Okay.
And he'll give me 5 reasons. I don't like the board, I don't like this one, I don't like this model, I don't think they're right in this. And I'll say, wow, I never looked at that. Or let me go back and look at that. Or he'll say, the person that came in, I just don't like them for whatever reason. And I'll say, that's interesting. And now I'll look at them with different eyes.
Sure.
Next meeting, what he has said to me, I will think about now and probably come to the same conclusion as him.
Okay.
Because there have been very few we've invested in by ourselves without including the other. Very few. There have been a few. One of the ones is Airtasker. didn't like it, I invested in it. So there are a few. And I'm pleased with that. It's gone well.
It seems to be going successful at the moment.
Anything else in terms of how you keep that collaboration going? Is it, you obviously don't sound emotionally attached to those.
He's a very good friend of mine.
Yeah.
So he is a good friend of mine. We've been friends for a lot of years. We've got each other's back. He'll never think that in a meeting there's any ulterior motive with me as opposed to him. Never. And I phone him regularly. If I haven't spoken to him, if I haven't seen him, we share offices. If I haven't seen him for 2 days, I'll phone him. He's on holiday. He'll phone me and say, what's going on, how are things going,
Okay. Are there things during those discussions that get under your skin, that annoy you or tick you off from an emotional perspective?
From discussions between me and him, or discussions in investments?
Both.
Well, I'll tell you the one in investments which always can get a bit under my skin. People walk into your office and they're giving you a presentation, wonderful presentation, and I say, what are you valuing this thing? And they're valuing it at $10 million. And I say, great valuation. How do you get to $10 million? Right. And the guy will say, my last round that I invested, I raised $300,000, was at a valuation of $10 million. And then I say, yeah, but we're not in that league. We're not in the FF&F league, which I'm sure you all know what that is, the Fools, Family and Friends League. So they've gone to their mothers and their fathers and their friends, and they've raised at a valuation of $10 million. And now they're going to persuade you why that business is worth $10 million for you to invest in. And I say, I'm not in that business. And then I say, we will do a deal. I like it very much. Our valuation is 4. And then they'll say to me, but how do I go back and explain to my mother, my brother, that you only think it's worth 4? I said, unfortunately, that's not my problem. It's not worth 10. You're never going to get this away at 10. And if you can, and the other people, I won't stop you. Go for it. But we don't think it's worth it. And the other thing that sort of doesn't get under my skin, because very little of investments get under my skin, but one of the things I learned at Investec, we used to do the MES piece of the finance of property. So a person used to walk in and they used to say to us, I want to do this new development, and let's say it's $100 million, and the banks will lend us, I can't remember, $40 million. We need someone to put up the other $40 million, which is the MES piece, which is us, and we take the equity. We're not putting up $20 million, but we take the equity portion of that. And we say, okay, so how do we split the profits? And they say to us, well, you're putting up MES, you're putting up an interest rate, so now we need some of the profits. And they say, okay, we'll give you 5% of the profits. And I say to them, and they're giving us interest. And I say to people, so what you are is expecting us to take 100% of the risk and very small of the reward. Because when things go wrong, the banks will take the property and they'll give us whatever's left over, and we will be left holding no value. And we've taken 100% of the reward, 100% of the risk, and you want 95% of the reward. That doesn't work for us. And as I do investments, I learn that when people come and tell me they're going to give me 10% of an investment, and I'm taking all the risks, I don't negotiate. I just say, I'm not that type of investor. It doesn't work. The numbers don't work. And I heard a very good comment, a very good story from a friend of mine. He was telling a group of people. He said that if you take Kerry Packer and Alan Bond, Kerry Packer owned Channel 9. Alan Bond bought Channel 9 from Kerry Packer. Same business, just paid very different amounts for it. It worked in Kerry Packer's hands. It couldn't work in Alan Bond's hands because Alan overpaid for it. Investments are the same. You overpay for something because you've got a bad deal. It's going to take you a hell of a long time if you're lucky to get back your money. One more thing I'll tell you, one more famous, fantastic story I heard. When I was young, I went to pitch to someone for money. I went to pitch. And I gave them this wonderful proposal. And I said to them, in 3 years' time, you can get your money back. And the guy said to me, and I quote this once a month. The guy said to me, I have my money now. Why do I want to wait 3 years to get it back? And I love that as an expression. I use it all the time. When people say to me, I'll give you back your money in 3 years. I say, but I got it now.
Absolutely. So when business owners are, looking for investment and they're looking to come up with valuation, what are your suggestions? What do you suggest? How do they value their business? How do they then package it up and go to investors such as yourself? What does that valuation piece look like? I tell you,
it's really what someone's prepared to invest in. It's the hardest thing in the world because if you've got to start, if you're making profits, I'll give you another story. I'll dine out all these stories. So excuse me if you don't want to hear them. But I had a wine business. And I'm sitting with a friend of mine who's got a supercapacitors business. It's a fantastic business. And he says to me, how much is your turnover in your wine business? And I say, $10 million. And I say to him, how much is your turnover? And he says to me, clearly you understand nothing about business. Why? He says, because if I had any turnover, people would be able to value me. And because I've got no turnover, I've raised £100 million so far. Wow. So, I'll give you this. Who knows what things are worth? It's just what feels right at startup stage. Once a company's making profits, it's really easy to value because you know what it's worth, you know what it's going to, you know what it can do. But it's very difficult. I don't want to pretend I've got an answer. I don't. Okay. Very difficult.
You were going to ask something.
Thank you, Sean. So we've got a few questions from the floor, and they, let's touch on some of these themes. But I think it is still important to ask them in the way they've been presented. So, as an investor, and somebody comes and pitches you, what do you look for? Is there one thing? Is it a lot of things? Is it the business model, the valuation, strategy, market analysis, experience? Is there an order of importance?
So I'll give you the order of importance as I see it. Firstly is a person. The person that's coming to pitch. Secondly is the experience. Thirdly is the idea. Fourthly is what are they committed to it so far. Sort of those are the things. A good person can actually succeed with a bad business. A bad person is never going to succeed with a good idea. It just doesn't work that way. So I've got to like the person. I've got to know that they know what they're talking about. So if they bring me a business and I ask 3 or 4 questions and they get lost,
game over.
Game over. It's not,
Okay, so just following on from the person, again. So the question here is, what attribute do you look for in the individual or team? You've mentioned some of those. A few more things that you can add about.
Well, I do research on people, so yes. I tell you, great stalker of people. I go to LinkedIn. I look at everything about their LinkedIn profile. I look to see who the people we have in common on LinkedIn, and I phone up people. And if I've got someone in common, I phone and say, do you know so-and-so? What have you heard about so-and-so? Is there anything I should know about so-and-so? And I'll tell you how well it works. A guy comes to me, pitches me a business. I love the business. I love the idea. I love everything about it. I like his personality. And I phone up one of his LinkedIn colleagues, and the guy says to me, do you know he's bankrupt? Really? He didn't tell me that. So, that's off the table immediately. Yep. You learn, and people will, unless they're best mates, of course, then you're going to get caught. And they normally people on LinkedIn aren't your best mates. They're people that swap cards with someone who've met you somewhere in business. They will tell you, they will tell you a lot of things. One of the things they do, you've got to have a good LinkedIn profile because they look at you and they decide whether you're worthy of giving them information or whether they're giving you information. So otherwise they just, don't call me sort of. But in the main, they will tell you quite a lot. Or they will tell you someone else, they're not friendly with them, and maybe you should try. And I've had people who say, listen, I don't even know why we're LinkedIn. I don't know who the guy is. And I made 9 phone calls till I found someone who knows the guy. And then I thought to myself, I don't want to invest in him because nobody at LinkedIn knows him. So,
9 phone calls. Right?
9 phone calls, and nobody knew him on his LinkedIn. All his first, nobody knew him.
Could I just ask a question on that piece in relation to LinkedIn? And there's an interesting piece where some people will only connect if they know the individual, and others will connect just for, accept connections. What's your thoughts on that?
No, I don't do that. I never accept a connection from someone I don't know, unless I look at their profile and I find their profile really interesting, and then I will connect. So if they've got a good profile and I think, wow, then I've had this quite a lot of time. Then they start trying to sell me something. I send back a question mark, because it wasn't what I thought was going to happen. I thought that they somehow, So I'll accept people if I know them or they've got an interesting connection. I will go through their resume because what I don't want to do is I don't want to turn down somebody or ignore somebody who sort of worked with me somewhere. Sure. So if I find they worked at Investec or they worked with me somewhere, but I can't remember them, of course I will accept them.
Yep.
But if they're interesting, if I think they're going to sell me anything, I don't want to know it.
Okay, just coming back to that contact that was a bankrupt. There's often that talk that in Australia we or in the US, people celebrate failures and they're happy to back and invest with people that have failed at a lot of things, and we don't do that in Australia. What's your view about that topic? You know, would you have invested with that guy if he had disclosed that he was a bankrupt, or if the rest of it was good? Or
can I say this to you? Firstly, if he disclosed he was a bankrupt, it would change the way I felt about him after finding out he was a bankrupt. So I would have thought, wow, he's telling me. And then I would have said, okay, where are you in this process? Who do you owe? What's the bad vibe around you? One of the things is you've got to be careful, who you're associating with, of course, because you know, it depends on how much trouble he really is. I'm not there to bail out people I don't know, or you know,
or rescue
or rescue him. If he's came with a logical story and he had been bankrupt 3 years ago and was a business wasn't his fault and didn't do anything wrong, absolutely. You know what? So what? I agree with you. So what? This wasn't the case here, by the way. It wasn't the case. He had taken a whole lot of people recently, even. It wasn't the case.
Okay.
But I agree with you. I would try. I mean, that's a different situation.
Okay. One last question. What's the greatest disruptor that your businesses have encountered? So disruptor is in technology or something that forced the whole business to change, or something about your forced the practices of the business to change. Any big disruptors like that?
Well, everything today, everything is going to get disrupted. So one has to be in a business and think, who's going to disrupt? I mean, if you take Afterpay as one of the best success stories of the time right now, there must be 20 companies right now trying to disrupt Afterpay. Wow. So everybody's going to try and disrupt everything you've ever done. So the internet has disrupted everybody, and every facet of your business, somebody somewhere is going to work out how to disrupt what you're currently doing and do it better, smarter, quicker. And unfortunately, that when you are, let's just say you in your 40s, there are going to be a lot of guys in their 20s, youngsters, who are going to, very smart, who are going to find ways of producing good businesses to disrupt whatever you are that you're doing. So you've got to be on top of it. You've got to try and get on top of what you can change in your own business that you can't get stood on that quickly.
And what does that look like, John? Like there's businesses in the audience that have perhaps plateaued, or they're looking to grow, and that disruption, they're perhaps feeling that energy around, I need to disrupt. What do you suggest they do? Where can they look?
Well, you've got to streamline all your processes. You know, it's hard to me because you asked me for a general answer to really specific people, but you've got to streamline your processes, produce high quality products and be the lowest cost in doing it. You've got to be able to compete with the guy who's got an app. A guy who's selling, if you're selling fridges and you've got stock of fridges and you've got somebody on an app who just gets the warehouse, the manufacturer to deliver it straight to the customer, you know, maybe you should also try and go and do that instead of having a warehouse full of, instead of giving a 2-day delivery, you'll give a 3-day, or maybe go to a 1-day delivery, or maybe have a reason. You've got to have a raison d'etre, which is a reason for being.
Yep.
Why you've got a reason for being. So we were in charge of, bought a business and they sold oil supplies, consumables for the oil industry.
Okay.
And the guy used to phone us up, not me, but he used to phone the company up and say, I want this seal, pump, etc. And we say, we've got one in stock and it's $2,000. And the person would say, you know, I can go on the internet and get it for $500. And we say, please do. And you say, but no one's got them in stock. And we used to say, but we keep them in stock for your emergencies. You're on an oil rig, you're pumping oil, we can get it to you. You want it now, you've got to pay for it. You want to wait, we'll get it for you we'll get it to you at $400, but you've got to wait. You've got to wait a month for it to come. And the guy says, but I'm producing oil. And you've got to pay for it, we'll get it for you. But you know, you've got to do something differently to what everyone else is doing.
Okay.
When we started Techway, when we started internet banking, our competition was Microsoft. Microsoft weren't doing an internet banking product. So we would go to banks and say, we're going to do internet banking for you. And they say, well, we're going to wait for Microsoft to bring out a product against you. Sorry, I've lost the marker. We're going to bring out a product against you. You know, so we had competition that wasn't even there. In people's minds, we had competition. You've got to be thinking about what's coming, what's next, and researching what else is happening and what you can beg, borrow, and steal to bring that into your business to cope.
So never stop improving.
Never stop improving what you're doing, because somebody's going to come and eat your lunch otherwise. And as the retailers all finding out that, people are going to retail, they're not even having premises.
And spend time looking at what your competitors are doing. And,
you have to know what everybody in the industry is doing and what you can do better.
Okay, fantastic.
And are there any, systems or processes or approaches that you would suggest people consider in how to go about doing that? Are there things you found that have worked well?
I'll tell you what, I think it works well for me. I've got a son who's in the industry and he's a big disruptor, and I go to him for a lot of the ideas, and I say to him, we've got this, what do you suggest we do? Or we're looking at buying this business. He'll say to me, have you seen this one, this one, this one? They're also in that industry. So you've got to find people around you that, if you've got kids that age, talk to your kids and, see what's going on in their world, because they're going to know. If they're 18, 19, 20, 21 at university, they know an enormous amount. Talk to them, tell them what the processes are. They'll research them for you. My son, not now because now he's too busy, but he used to research things for me and come back, say to me, don't go into this investment. There are 5 others that are doing it better than you, smarter than you. Oh, wow. Or don't do this, or how can we fix this at work? Right. And he used to say to me, phone so-and-so, so-and-so, and so-and-so. They're in the same business. Ask them to come and see you.
Okay. And if you're a business owner who's working, you're working your guts out from dawn to dusk, 6 days a week, how do you find the time?
You can't. Unfortunately, unfortunately, you give me a very hard example, because when you're so busy trying to put food on the table, it's hard to see what's going on around you and to strategize and to think what's going on. Then you have to have groups like this, Dan, and talk to them and come and tell them your problems and all of that, because that's the hardest position to be in when you're trying to feed your family and you've got to go to work and you've got to be there 6 days a week and you can do nothing else.
So break out of that first. Yeah, break out of that.
It's hard to break out of it, but you've got to come to meetings like this and get colleagues and mentors, etc., and discuss your issues with them and get their ideas.
Very good. Okay. So last question, trends. So what trends and patterns are you noticing that in the next 12 to 18 months, business owners like the people in this room should pay attention to or act on?
Well, I'll tell you, this is very easy. I went to a Credit Suisse conference and they actually told you all of this. So this is a real easy question.
Creditors conference.
So it's health. As the population gets older, it's absolutely health, and no one can ever do away with seeing a doctor. You can diagnose yourself on the internet, and I'm sure you all have done it 100 times, but you've got diseases no one's ever heard of when you do that. So, health is a big thing, for an aging population. Services to people, you've got to get your hair cut. You can't do it on the internet. You've got to go for someone to have your hair cut. Those are the trends. Artificial intelligence is coming along at a rapid rate. I went to a talk by a guy who, 35, he got on the stage, Asian guy, had his hair, full head of hair, but all stuck out about that much. And he got onto the stage, and I thought to myself, looks like he's a jerk. And then he started telling us what he does. And what he does is I try to improve people's lives. Yes, try to improve. And he says, I work with the disabled, and I'm trying to make sure that disabled people have as good a life as anybody else. And then he has on this, I've lost that again, and he has on the screen all the work he's doing. And at the end of this presentation, I was in love with the guy. He was showing you that the guy had cerebral palsy, and how the guy, all he wanted to do was drive a car, and how he rigged a buggy up to the guy, put a band around his head, and with the guy's eye movements, he could control the car and drive a car. And you see the guy, the youngster, who can't really use his arms and that, driving a car. Now that technology is going to come in leaps and bounds. And at the end of this presentation, I thought this guy was going to rule the world. He was so good. And services like that are just going to become more and more in need, looking after people. And artificial intelligence is coming at an absolute rapid rate. Sequencing of the human body, etc. All of those, anything to do with health, looking after people, people's lifestyles, etc., is just growing.
Fantastic, Jon. Okay, so I think that's a wrap. We're almost out of time. Sean, thank you so much for leading the conversation, for taking the time to get to know Jon better and to understand his journey and to lead us through the conversation. So please join me in thanking Sean for his contribution this evening. And Jon, we're coming, I guess, to I've had 2 years of conversations with you, so every single one of them is valuable to me. I always learn something. I really appreciate you spending your time with us this evening. Takeaways for me in terms of what you shared were share your problems. You know, if you keep them to yourself, they're all yours. If you share them, they're everybody's. Gather great people around you. Share your problems. Take as much advice as you can. Manage by walking around, so that's a fabulous one, and that collegial relationships with everyone you work with. So again, thank you for your time this evening. Please join me in thanking Jon for his contribution tonight.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Okay, so we've got the room till about 7 p.m. this evening. And so I've got just a couple of requests before we end the formal part of the proceedings. If I could ask all of you to pull out your phones, so they should all be on silent, but please pull them out. All of you should have a Hubb feedback form at the top of your inbox, which we sent to you probably 5 p.m. or something like that, 5:30 p.m. If I could please ask you to take 75 seconds, and I know that because I did the form yesterday, and it took me 75 seconds. Please take 75 seconds to fill out that feedback form. I'll just keep on making a few extra announcements while you do that. We're not, at Hubb, we're not necessarily elite athletes, and we're not pretending to be, but we love, we need feedback in terms of how to run these events better, how to run Hubb better. I don't have a factory to walk around and check with people, but I can ask all of you to give us feedback on how to do things better. Next year, 14th of October, we've got an annual dinner. One of the awards at that annual dinner will be best feedback or most useful feedback via a feedback form. So that race starts today. So start filling out your feedback forms. And first event next year is the 12th of February. So that's where we kick off with a conversations event. All of you will receive a schedule of events for all of next year. So we go from February to September. We've got learning panels. We've got our FedEx Innovation Days where we do an immersive innovation event for business owners. And the annual dinner in October. So 12th of February next year, our featured speaker is Rebecca Grant from... Sorry, I'm just getting a few signals.
That's okay. The email hasn't
arrived.
So that's okay.
Okay, all right. Technical difficulties, okay. If you could please fill it out when you get it. Thank you. Featured speaker, 12th of February, is Rebecca Grant. So Rebecca leads a business called iCourts. iCourts has done all the tech for the last 3 or 4 Royal Commissions. So iCourts is in that really interesting space between people, the law, lawyers, technology, and depending on which way you look at it, it's either a freight train coming towards lawyers or a wave of change. So she's in that really interesting space where there's a lot going on there, and she leads a multidisciplinary team of creatives, of lawyers, of engineers, and she has a lot to share with us in terms of, how do you lead a business like that? How do you manage things in that situation? So I'd like to then finish with, we've got time till 7. Please make the most of the conversations. I'd like to wish all of you a loving and safe festive season. I look forward to seeing you all next year. So please join me in thanking all our guests and speakers and our community of business owners this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you, Shawnee.
Drinks and nibbles.
Keep this on.
Drinks and nibbles.
Dan, you want me to keep this on?
Drinks and nibbles will be served again.